I'm Kat McDonald, and welcome to Rebloom Room podcast. In this episode, we speak with Shirin Eskandani. Shirin is a life coach, speaker, writer, and life alchemist living in Brooklyn. She teaches her clients to trust their intuition, stop playing small, and to live a more joyful life. If you've been feeling stuck lately, Shirin has some words of wisdom for you. Welcome, Shirin.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks for joining. So to start us off, I'm going to read a quote from your Instagram. The colonizers colonized our dreams. They colonized our imaginations. To dream is an act of revolution. We can only create the unimaginable when we begin to dream again. Can you talk to us about creating the unimaginable?
Okay, well, I love that you start with this quote. I was like, I don't know, there's so many quotes to choose from. And the fact you picked this quote, this one for me really was, I think it's at the core of everything I do. As an immigrant Muslim woman who is from the Middle East, from a heavily colonized part of the world. I mean, literally, where is not colonized except, like Europe and, well, everywhere pretty much. So because of the trauma I experienced, but then also not just that, the intergenerational trauma in my lineage, I didn't realize it at the time, but that limited me in how I imagined my future. And there's a really beautiful Adrienne Maree Brown quote about this. And this is, I'd been feeling this and sensing it. And then I read it in her book, Emergent Strategy. And it was like this huge aha moment where she said that, anytime someone lays claim to geography and they, that they are then really reimagining they get to imagine the future of that place, right? And so then all of a sudden they take away that sense of imagination and dreaming of those people who used to live there. And then now those people are just in this place of survival and safety. And so for me, coming from that, this lineage of colonization, of trauma, I really realized that even though I was creating this really incredible life from the outside, at the root of it was safety. And at the root of it was, okay, well, what are other people who look like me and who speak like me and who come from my background? What do they do? How do they live? And so I really realized that I was creating this future. My imagination was limited to this very small box, and a box that was given to me, not even one that I was like, okay, I'm going to create this box for myself. It was one that I kind of had up until that point thought, oh, well, this is the box in which you play in. And I had done a really great job of that. And the moment that I realized that actually imagination is the key to liberation, right? Like we have to imagine beyond what we have been told and seen. And there is a real audaciousness to that. It's terrifying and it's scary, but it's really truly imagination, dreaming. I like to use the word of dreaming. I think we should all be dreaming way more. And in that really expansive way we used to dream when we were young, where, we didn't dream just so it could happen, but we dreamed because it felt good. And because an integral part of who we are is just dreamers, right? And so this reclamation of my imagination has been such a huge part of the transformation of my life, because now I don't limit myself to any boxes. Now I'm just allow myself to freely imagine what could possibly be.
When colonizers come in, they draw the map of a country. I just realized that as you're talking, that they decide where the borders are. They decide where the limits of the cities are, and they redraw a map. Their imagination goes on paper as the record of what that place is.
Absolutely. Yeah. As you say that, that's exactly it, right? We don't realize how much that lack of agency, I mean, we can get it on a very basic, like, oh, the borders and this and that, but it's like, you no longer have this way of imagining what your country, your people could be and what they could do, because now you have real literal boundaries and borders that are so arbitrary. They're not even based on the needs or wants or desires of that community. And then the ones that are like internal as well. So yeah, my gosh, that I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that as well, of those, lines drawn on a map that have nothing to do with the actual needs and desires of a community.
So I'm pretty sure I met you at a Creative Mornings event in 2020, a virtual event, where you walked us through a visualization exercise where we imagined our perfect day and we imagined our dream house in great detail. And then we walked up to the house and we went into the house and we spent time enjoying that space. And I really got a felt sense of what my life could or will look like. And I come back to that space. Like since then, it's been over a year and I keep coming back to that space. It's really real to me. Can you talk about what we were doing in that exercise? How it's so powerful?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite exercises. It's my future you visualization, in which you meet that future version of who you are in the space in which you imagine that person to be. It's a really powerful exercise because I think so often we get caught in the present day and either worry about the future or anxiety about the past, and so this future you visualization really asks you to just like let go of all of that and imagine what could be. And I really think in that visualization, we're tapping into our highest self, our intuition, whatever you want to call it, your inner guide, your innate wisdom, that part of you that like always knows you are taken care of and it's going to be okay. And I think it's essentially the energy of who we are. And it's something I kind of start off all my clients and all of my group programs. It's now become like one of the first things we do, because it's about, that thing of we have surviving and thriving. That's thriving, right? Thriving is imagining who am I becoming and really allowing yourself to follow the feelings that you imagine there. And Kat, I love that you can tap into those feelings, because I think what we need to be pursuing more and more in our lives is how we want to feel. And I think that's why that visualization is so important. I always say when I do it, it doesn't matter if you can see future you, if they communicate with you, it does not matter. Sink into the feelings. What does it feel like to be around them? How do they hold themselves? What's their energy like? That's more important. That's who we get so caught up in the what, but really the what is a flimsy placeholder for how we want to feel, right? Like we imagine that, the terrible, terrible goal that so many of us who've been socialized as women, losing weight. We think losing 10 pounds or 15 or whatever pounds is going to make us be happy. But it's like, actually, you can be happy right now. Or we think getting a partner or having a house. And so if we can really pursue those feelings, then the what becomes like not important. And also the what becomes so much more flexible. And sometimes it surprises you. You're like, oh, I'm going to move to Portugal because that's where my happy is. That's, or I'm going to, get a trampoline. That like, who knows what it is, but yeah, I love that you come back to that, because I think there's so much wisdom in how we want to feel.
You said that the way the law of attraction is often taught doesn't work for people of color and marginalized people. What's your approach to the law of attraction?
Oh goodness, Kat, I love what we're talking about. So when I, first got into the world of self-growth and self-development, it's changing, but still oftentimes is a very white, able-bodied, privileged, cisgendered space. As a woman of color, I would find myself in these spaces. And because I was so thirsty for the information and the knowledge, I was there for it, even though, there was microaggressions and things didn't make sense to me. And a lot of the times I thought, well, maybe this isn't for me, because the way they were talking about things, it just didn't reflect who I was and the worries I had in my experience in life. And one of the biggest ones was this idea of manifestation. And I just really, I read The Secret. I, done, the visualization boards and moon ceremonies, and like things weren't happening. What I manifest, and I just thought, okay, well, you don't look like those people who are talking about this stuff. So maybe manifestation isn't for you. But I was like, no, it is. And so I started doing a lot of research, really realizing that, it was how manifestation was being taught and who was teaching it. That's what wasn't resonating for me. The principles of manifestation, the law of attraction, it's for everyone. And it's rooted in so many ancestral technologies, indigenous cultures, right? So it is for everyone. And our ancestors have been manifesting and since day one. However, if we, look at the law of attraction and we don't bring up trauma, white supremacy, systems of oppression and privilege, we're leaving out a huge part of the equation, right? I have another Instagram post is like, did you manifest it or is it just white supremacy? Right? So if we don't acknowledge that there is privilege, then we're making people who come from historically marginalized communities feel like they're not doing something right. Mm-hmm. And that's just not true. That's not true. And so my way of looking at manifestation is as intersectional as I can make it. And it's something I'm continually working on to include more voices into it, because it's very, very whitewashed and it does not acknowledge a lot of systems of oppression and privilege.
And it feels a lot of times like it's blaming the victim, like you don't have this golden glowing life, so you called it on yourself. Like the bad things that are happened to you, you must have called it. You must have called it.
Absolutely. And this makes me so infuriated, Kat, because then people just think it's their problem and then they just get into this further cycle. And so I think when it comes to things like law of attraction and manifestation, we all can do it. But if we come from, if we have trauma, whether it's inherited or our own trauma, we have a couple more hurdles, right, and challenges to kind of meet and to tend and to heal. But it's not impossible. But that's kind of what we need to really be talking about, is that, like, manifestation is this belief that things are going to work out for me. Like, no matter how difficult this is, this will happen. The things that I truly desire and want will happen. But if you come from a background where that's like never been your reality, that's just not, it doesn't seem feasible. And if you look at your own community and you see kind of the same patterns happening again and again, right? So this is why I always say, like, the reason why white men can manifest the most ridiculous stuff is because they have so much proof of concept around them. And so, there is no quote unquote resistance, right? So in manifestation, they say the only thing that gets in the way, right? That when you say you want something, the universe is like, cool, let's make this happen for them. But it's your resistance, it's your beliefs that stop it from kind of getting to you in a quick manner. So look at white men, no wonder there's such a lack of resistance, because they see other white men doing these things and doing them in the most, ridiculous ways and unhealthy ways and manipulative ways. And so, yeah, this to me, if we don't acknowledge and talk about these things, we're leaving out a huge part of the equation. And as you said, making people feel like there's something wrong with them. And that can't be further from the truth.
Can you talk about the difference between attracting and chasing?
Oh, yes. So I always say, you can will your way into any manifestation. And I was very, very good at this. And I think that those of us, if you are BIPOC, if you come from an immigrant family, you just know you put in 110%. And that you really, if you want something, you go and get it, right? And so you will your way into a life. And I did that for a very long time. So before I was a coach, I had a very successful career as an opera singer. And that's literally, what I wanted to do as a young girl. But at the base, the core belief when I really got into my opera singing was, I'm going to prove them all wrong. I'm going to be the best, right? So that was my belief that was pushing me towards this. And I was putting in a lot of hard work. And I manifested my dream. I sang at the Metropolitan Opera. However, I was exhausted. I was miserable. I resented every minute of, well, once I got to the Met, it was amazing, but that's because I went through my kind of dark soul of the night. But when I got my job, I was so miserable. And so I was like, I realized, wow, I willed my way into this life. And I find a lot of my clients, right, they will their way into jobs, into partnerships, and then they realize, oh my gosh, I don't want this. Like this,
I definitely have done that.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's a survival mechanism, and it's a beautiful thing, and it protects us, and we get very far. But like, so that's willing manifestation. But when you're allowing for manifestation, the beliefs that are at the core of that are so much more loving. They're so much more open, right? It's not like I'm going to prove them wrong, but like, this is my journey and I'm claiming what's mine, you know, things that are much more expansive. And the process, the journey is so much more loving and compassionate. And also when we're allowing, I always say the universe, source, whatever you want to believe in, that power has something way bigger than you could ever imagine. And so when I allow for my manifestations to happen, things are like 10 times more amazing in a way that I could have never imagined. Because again, when you're willing your way into manifestation, you can only will your way into what you have seen or think is best for you. Whereas when you allow, that's when things come to you that you're like, I could have never imagined this. I could have never known that this thing was out there. And yeah, but I think they're both manifesting, but the processes are so different.
And the outcome it sounds like the outcome is different. You're getting something better than what you want, or you might be just railroading yourself into some kind of trap.
Exactly that. And I like how you said, I've done that. I mean, listen, Kat, it's a practice. You know, when you're just like, you're so used to working 110% and you think you know what you want. I mean, I can make anything happen, and I'm sure you can too, but that doesn't mean I'm supposed to make it happen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You get caught up in the chase and it's almost a game. And then it's at the end of the game and you're like, crap, I won, but why don't I feel like I won?
It's exactly that.
So can you talk about mindset and why it's so important, an important part of creating a life that we love?
Mindset is everything. You know, I often on my podcast, my tagline is, you know, create your dream life while living your dream life. And I think a lot of the times we believe in a mythical land called there. And we think once we get there, everything's going to be better. There are going to be no stresses, you know, everything's magically figured out. And, you know, we get there, we've all had this experience. You get there, you do the thing, you achieve that thing, and you realize, oh crap, like I'm still here. So like the way I think and the way I do things. And again, anytime you achieve anything, with it comes its own laundry list of problems and worries and things to figure out. Right. And so with mindset, it's about creating this healthy inner world in which you can be present, in which you can be your own inner ally, in which you can process really tough moments in a healthy way. And I think mindset is another one of these words or things that in the wellness world has become really warped and commercialized. And when we hear the word mindset, we think of false positivity, right? And that's not what mindset is. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of people in the wellness world and coaches make it seem that way. And they even teach it that way, right? Like think of someone, I hate him so much, but Tony Robbins. Oh God. I said the dreaded words. Right? If you say it 3 times, he'll appear. But, you know, but we see this, right? Where they're kind of completely bypassing a person's experiences and where they are in the present and just telling them, no, think positive, just think positive and it's going to happen. And that's just a Band-Aid, right? We're like, we're treating a symptom. We're not actually getting to the root of what is causing the wound. And so for me, mindset is really this beautiful process of healing what's going on and really, you know, meeting yourself where you're at, but also expanding into who you want to become. So it's about creating thoughts and beliefs for yourself, which feel believable today, but also allow you to do the things you want to do, right? So instead of something like, I am enough, you hear this a lot with like, just look in a mirror and say, I am enough until you believe it. Well, you do that. And if for 30 plus, 40 plus, 50 plus years, you've been saying the opposite of that, you're going to look in the mirror, you're going to say it, you won't believe it. And then you feel even worse about yourself because this coach told you to say this thing and there's something wrong with you because you can't believe it, right? So we can't I call these Mount Everest thoughts. And Mount Everest thoughts are things like, I am enough, I am worthy, I trust my life, whatever. And it's not to say we can't get to the peak, but we first have to get to the base camp. I once had a client say, I just need to get to the airport. Like I don't even need to get, finding thoughts that allow you to slowly work your way up to I am enough. And that's the power of mindset work. That's how I came to it, where, one of my base camp thought was, let's just see what happens. And for me, it was the thought that was like an acceptance of, I don't know if this is going to work out. However, I'm going to be open and curious about what's on the other side of this. So like, let's just see what happens. And I can now say things like, I'm enough, I'm worthy. And I don't flinch. I don't feel that weird, body reaction because I worked my way towards it. And being able to shift your mindset in this slow, patient, loving way is really what creates an enjoyable journey. It's really what creates an enjoyable present. And enjoyable doesn't mean there aren't challenges, but it means that you know how to navigate them, not being an inner critic, but instead being an inner ally.
Yeah. Yeah, we could all use more of that.
Yes.
Definitely, yeah. So let's talk about boundaries.
Okay.
What does it look like when someone doesn't have good boundaries? And how can we practice setting boundaries?
So boundaries, to me, are how we show others how to love us. They're really difficult to enforce because I think that we have been taught, especially if you're a woman, we've been taught that to say no, to have, to need certain things and want certain things is what makes you like selfish. And I think the word selfish is something that's been weaponized against us. And instead we've been told to be selfless, right? If you look at the examples that I'm sure many of us grew up with, like when I think of my mom or even my aunties and grandma, like these were selfless people. And so the baseline of being a quote unquote good woman is to be selfless. And so I think the first thing we kind of have to really heal is what narratives and what beliefs we're carrying when it comes to really asking for the things we want, right? Because it's great for me to say to you, just say no, create boundaries. But if you believe yourself to be a terrible human or not kind or not a good person, then you're going to do it, but it's going to be very difficult. And you're probably not going to be able to sustain that. So I think with boundaries, that's kind of the first thing to do, to heal and to really look at, like, what are the narratives I grew up with? What do I believe? What did I see? And then when it comes to creating boundaries, I say boundaries are the trifecta of self. It's about self-awareness. So knowing what you need, knowing what is best for you. And then it's about self-trust, right? Trusting whatever comes up for you. And self-love, right? This is how I love myself. I need these things in my life to love myself. And then it's communicating it to others. And here's where it gets tricky, because it's not other people's responsibility to honor your boundaries. You are the only person who's responsible to honor your boundaries. I mean, it's lovely and it'd be wonderful if they did, and some people in our lives do, but it's not going to happen every time. And sometimes it takes a little bit of talking and discussion for that to happen. And especially if you've been living a very boundary-less life, it's going to be really jarring for people.
Yeah, it is. You're going to get resistance.
You're going to get resistance, and people are going to be like, this is so not like you. What's up? Like, I don't know who you are anymore. And I think another reason why we're so resistant to boundaries is like we want to create a boundary and still be liked and be understood. And sometimes that's just not going to be the case, right? And so when it comes to boundaries, it's realizing that you can either keep prioritizing other people's comfort, right, at the expense of your comfort, right? You're in discomfort, or you can start prioritizing your comfort, right? And I think that's the thing is like we keep prioritizing their comfort over our own. And a quick check-in that I do, we do this in Inner Compass, which is a resentment check-in. I always say resentment is a sign that a boundary is being crossed or a boundary needs to be created or a boundary isn't being honored, right? So whenever you're sensing resentment towards a person or a situation, that often points to, okay, wait a second, there's a boundary here that needs to be addressed, because we all know that feeling of like saying yes to something when every fiber of your being is telling you to say no. And it's almost like it's this unconscious knee-jerk reaction where you say yes, and then you know exactly what the experience is going to be like. You're going to be like totally miserable, exhausted, saying the most unkind things about this other person or the circumstance under your breath. And it's not good for either party, right? It's never good for either party. But boundaries and creating them, this is like a masterclass in just self-love. And it's a practice. It's a practice that takes so much time.
What happens when you have good boundaries? Like, what does that feel like? What's the experience?
I say boundaries are how we really honor our time and energy. Boundaries may mean you have more time for the things you really want to do. You have more energy to do those things. That to me is just really the greatest gift, right? Time and energy are not, they're a finite resource, right? They're things that you cannot make up for. And so really when you have boundaries, and again, I want to really enforce that it's not always going to be clean and wonderful, and sometimes on your own end, you're going to say no to things you actually really want to do. But when it comes down to it with your time and energy, you're like, oof, this isn't a good decision. So it's not always going to be this beautiful process of like, no, I'm not going to do that. Yes, I'm going to do that. It takes a little bit of time, but really when it comes down to it, it's about honoring and prioritizing your time and your energy.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Why is it so easy to figure out what other people need to do with their lives and so and so difficult to figure out our own messes?
Oh man, this is such a great question. Like, I work with a coach, I have a therapist, and I just think we have blinders when it comes to certain parts of who we are. Sometimes you need to borrow other people's belief in you before you can find that belief in yourself. And so if you can have a wonderful community around you, just a couple of people, not a lot, but that really see, because it's like I can see this with my clients and friends where I have this utmost belief in them that it's going to work out. They're going to figure it out. They will do the thing, whatever that is. But when they come to me, it's like Bambi legs, right? And it's the same with ourselves. Like we just have these blinders to who we are and our own experiences. And so it's just this process though of really recognizing who your people are though, who your team is, and keep it small, keep it intimate. But that's a huge, huge gift to have. And it really helps us out because we need help to get out of our own messes.
Yeah. And it's okay to admit that. Sometimes it takes a while to admit that and to actually finding, a good team to support you, but it's super important.
Super important. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think we're meant to solve our problems by ourselves. We're not supposed to heal alone. I just do not believe in this. Healing is not a singular person journey. I think it involves a community. And that's just so important.
So Shirin, how did you get into this work and what motivates you?
So I kind of mentioned this. I was an opera singer for about 10 plus years. And I, had a very successful career, and it was literally my childhood dream, right, to sing. And I made that happen. But, at a certain point, I really realized that I was miserable and I was exhausted and I really resented singing. And when I look back now, it was because I had always strived to be the best. Like my perfectionism, my people pleasing, my overachieving were what were fueling that dream for me. And I really didn't know what my identity was outside of being the best or doing the best. And so really it was this exhausting process. And also, the arts can be a very difficult environment, right? It's a very difficult environment in which you're consistently being rejected and criticized. And so you kind of take the human condition, which is to kind of already be self-critical. And then you put yourself in this like petri dish in which everyone's criticizing you and you don't get, 70% of the jobs you audition for. And 70% is being very generous, or probably 90%. And it can become, if you haven't done that inner healing, if you don't have those mindset tools, it can become a very difficult journey. And so about, 6 years ago, my literal dream came true when my agent called me and said, Shirin, the Metropolitan Opera wants you to sing Mercedes and Carmen. And this was literally, Kat, my dream come true. Like it could not have been, to sing at the Met, to sing in Carmen, to sing this role. Literally always dreamed of this, right? And this was a moment that I had dreamed of since I was little. And I'd always imagined that I would be like so happy and like beside myself, over the moon and joyous when I got this job, if I got this job. And I remember when I was in my 20s, really struggling as a singer, I would always say to myself, if you sing at the Met, you'll know you made it. You'll know you're good enough. You'll know you're successful. I got the contract, Kat, and I didn't feel any of those feelings. I didn't believe any of those things about myself. I looked at the contract and I said, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough for this. I don't know how I got this job. None of those feelings were there. And that's when I truly realized that nothing outside of ourselves will ever make us feel the way we want to feel. That's an inside job. And so it was really this aha moment in which I realized I need to heal what's going on internally and find that sense of fulfillment and enoughness inside of me, not outside of me through people and jobs, but really internally. And so I had a year and a half to prepare for this role. In the operatic world, we usually have a lot of time. And so most singers, will focus on their voice, which I did, but I really spent so much of my time doing the internal work. And I got into mindset work and mindfulness and meditation. And I started working with a coach, and it really transformed my life. It transformed the way I think about myself. And to this day, I say that my greatest accomplishment isn't singing at the Met, but it's singing at the Met and enjoying every part of that process, which meant that I enjoyed when, I was able to, be in the moment when I messed up, and I was able to be resilient, and I was able to just be in the joy of it. Like literally, like I memorized my first curtain call, Kat. And I know in the past I wouldn't have been able to do that, but like really viscerally when the curtain went up and I saw all those people, like just really taking in that moment and being so happy for myself, And that was really through all of that internal work. And by doing that, I found my love for singing again. I really ended up loving it again. But I also realized from that really aligned, clear headspace, I actually don't want to be a singer anymore because I don't like the industry. I don't like the lifestyle. It's not for me anymore. And so that's when I was like, you know what? I'm going to look into this coaching thing. I signed up for a certification, and yeah, it kind of developed from there. But I loved the sovereignty and the reclamation of who I was that I got through that process of coaching, and really reclaiming my life and really defining and designing my life for myself. And I was like, I want to do this with other people. Everyone should be able to do this. And yeah, that's kind of what motivates me, is to really to have that sense of like, you get to be the leader of your own life, and you get to do the things you want to do, and you can do it in a way that's enjoyable, and that you're you're in the joy of it all.
So Shirin, 2020 was a challenging year for so many of us. How did you take care of yourself during 2020 and beyond?
Ooh, 2020 was the year where I learned why I did all the work. It's like one of those years where you're like, oh, this is why I read all those like self-help books. And this is why I meditated. Like, what a year of just insecurity and just not feeling safe and every possible worst case scenario coming alive. Like, right. Like all those things that you're like, oh my God, wouldn't that be terrible? It's like, no, no, that could happen. And it's happening. And so I think for me, actually, this year was one of finding out that old adage is true, that like truly the smallest things are the most significant and the most important. And really it's not about those bigger things. It's really not. And, you know, this year was really about me finding joy in all of those little things, like moments with my husband and time on walks and, you know, hearing the birds chirp, especially because I live in New York and it was really dicey here for a while. I just remember, you know, in March and April and May, just opening the windows every day. And because the streets were so quiet, because no one was in the streets, for once New York was silent, and just hearing the birds and just having so much gratitude and joy for that. But that this last year taught me so much also about letting go of what you think things are supposed to look like and be like, and just rolling with it. And honestly, I can, as the world slowly opens up, I can see how those things are kind of going away. Yeah. How I'm like getting more busy and like, okay, I want to do this and then I want to do that. And I'm just like, wait. Actually, there was a real beauty, even though it was a terrifying and, you know, a very extremely stressful time for all of us and for some of us much more. There was a beauty to that time as well, in which nothing was really required of me except to be, you know, and to be. And I know that was scary at times, but it was really lovely at times too. Yeah.
Slowing down.
Yes.
So what are you excited about working on in the coming year?
I am excited. I have a couple things in Wholehearted coaching that I'm dreaming of right now. One of them is a membership that I'm really excited to create, and I'm in the process of creating right now. But one thing that I'm putting out this is the first time I'm saying it out loud to like someone I don't know who's not my partner. But one thing that I know is going to be happening in the coming years is a coaching certification. Because I love this modality so much. And it's one in which we need so many more diverse voices and backgrounds to contribute to it. We need more trauma-informed coaches. We need more, anti-racist coaches. We need so much more just holistic coaching in this world. And so it's something that's kind of been tugging at my soul for a little bit. And I was like, no, someone else will do it and, you know, whatever. But like, actually, no, now I feel like it's kind of like a real yearning to create that. So
wow, cool. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we close?
I know I'm just so thankful for this conversation, thankful for the questions you asked. They were just so insightful and wonderful and deep. And yeah, I just reiterating what we started with, which is just, you know, there is mythical. It's a mythical place. And this moment right now, I say this often, but this moment right now is actually one that you used to dream of. So really savoring and relishing in that. And that doesn't mean that we don't still dream of different and more, but really recognizing what is here now. And I think that's what this whole purpose of life is, I think, is to be able to be in the joy and in the present and in the absolute awe. There's a really beautiful quote it's often attributed to Thich Nhat Hanh. It's not Thich Nhat Hanh, but it's in one of his books. But it's from a Zen master. And it says, you know, the miracle is not walking on fire. The miracle is not walking on water. The miracle is walking on earth. And I really think of that often, of like what a miracle it is to be doing this thing called life.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shirin. I'm going to link to your website and your podcast and all of the things so that people can get in touch with you. And I really appreciate you joining us for the podcast today.
Thank you so, so much for having me, Kat. This was such a pleasure and joy.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to Rebloom Room podcast. You can find links to related resources at rebloomroom.com/podcast. And if you like this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time.